Have you ever rented a place that felt wrong? Not because of the neighbors, or the smell in the hallway, or the price tag, but something deeper, something you can't explain, yet your body knows it doesn't belong there. This story comes from a subscriber named Josh. He stayed in an apartment in Dallas for only 1 month, 30 days. But those 30 days were enough to scar him forever. And tonight, through his words, I'll take you into that apartment. Apartment 6B. I had just turned 26 when I moved to Dallas. I was excited, almost naive. A new city, a new job, a new life. The apartment I found wasn't special. It was small, slightly outdated, and the hallways smelled faintly of damp carpet. But the rent was cheap enough, and something in me wanted to believe this was the start of better days. I signed the lease, carried in my boxes, and felt that rush of independence. It was mine, my little corner of Dallas. I remember standing in the living room on that first night, staring at the beige walls and the single window that overlooked the street. It was quiet. Too quiet, actually. But I brushed it off. I had no idea what that silence was hiding. The first night, nothing extraordinary happened, until around 2 in the morning. I woke up, not sure why, and just lay there in bed. That's when I heard it. Slow, deliberate, measured. They didn't sound rushed, like someone coming home late. They sounded purposeful, as if whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. And then they stopped, right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of a key or a knock. But there was nothing. Just silence, thick and heavy, pressing against my ears. Finally, I gathered the courage to lean out of bed and look through the peephole. The corridor stretched out in both directions, lit by a dim bulb that flickered every few seconds. But there was no one there. I laughed softly at myself, blaming it on nerves and new surroundings. But that was the beginning. The days that followed were strange in small ways. I would hear faint knocking on the walls, always late at night. Sometimes it was so soft I almost thought it was in my head. Other times it was sharp, like knuckles rapping right by my ear. But when I asked the landlord, he swore the unit beside mine was empty, vacant. So, who was knocking? I tried to ignore it. I told myself old buildings make noises, pipes expand, wood creaks, electricity hums. But deep down, I knew. These weren't the sounds of a building. They were the sounds of someone who wanted me to notice them. One evening, after work, I made dinner and sat down in front of the television. The glow filled the apartment with a warm, comforting light. For a moment, I felt normal again. I got up to wash my dishes. When I returned, the TV was off. The remote was exactly where I left it. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered back to life. I sat down again, trying to shake off the unease. 5 minutes later, the TV went black once more. And that's when it happened. As the screen dimmed, it briefly reflected the room behind me. And in that reflection, I saw a figure, a shadow, tall, still, standing just a few feet behind my chair. I spun around so fast I nearly tripped. The room was empty. Of course it was empty. But the reflection had been so clear, I couldn't convince myself I had imagined it. That night, I dreamed of her for the first time. The dream was always the same. I was in my apartment, but it wasn't mine anymore. The walls were peeling, the floor warped, the air thick with rot. And in the corner of my bedroom stood a woman, her face hidden in shadow, her body motionless, watching me. When I woke up, sweat dripping down my back, The air in the room felt colder than it should have. And in the faint glow of the streetlight outside, I could swear I saw her shape lingering in the corner before it dissolved into the dark. By the second week, I wasn't sleeping much. Every creak, every sigh of the building set me on edge. But things escalated beyond noises. It was nearly 3 a.m. when a pounding rattled my door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that shakes the frame, that makes your heart slam against your ribs. I stumbled out of bed, adrenaline surging, and pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. The corridor was empty again. But when I opened the door, just a crack, my blood ran cold. Carved into the wood, deep and uneven, were scratch marks. Long, jagged, claw-like. As if something had been desperately trying to get in. The scratches didn't make sense. I ran my fingertips across them, feeling the splinters of wood where something had dug deep. It wasn't a prank. No human hand could have carved those marks so fast, so violently, and disappeared without a sound. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. The pounding. Sometimes it was faint, far away. Other times it felt like it was inside the room, just inches from my headboard. When I did finally drift off, the dream returned. And this time, the woman stepped closer. I saw more of her face. Skin stretched pale, lips cracked, eyes dark and empty. Her hair hung in mats across her shoulders, and when she smiled, her teeth were blackened stubs. I woke gasping for air. But worse than the dream was the fact that the smell had followed me back into waking life. It was rancid, like rotting meat. It clung to my sheets, my clothes, my hair. I tore the apartment apart, searching for the source. I checked the fridge, the trash, even the air vents. Nothing. And yet, the stench lingered, thickest near my bedroom. I started to dread going home. I would stay late at work, wander the city streets, sit in a coffee shop until closing. Anything to avoid walking back into that apartment. But no matter how late I stalled, eventually, I always had to return. And every time I opened that door, the air felt heavier, like the building itself was exhaling something foul into my lungs. One night, the haunting grew bolder. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I felt it, a pressure on my chest. At first, I thought it was sleep paralysis, but then it grew heavier, crushing until I could barely breathe. I forced my eyes open, and there she was, the woman from my dreams. Straddling my chest, her tangled hair brushing against my skin. Her face hovered inches above mine, eyes black and bottomless, her mouth stretching open wider and wider, as though she were about to swallow me whole. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. My arms flailed, useless, paralyzed by the weight of her. Her cold breath seeped into my mouth, into my lungs, until I thought I would suffocate. And then, just as suddenly, she vanished. The weight lifted, leaving me gasping, sobbing, drenched in sweat. That was the night I realized this wasn't just strange noises or bad dreams. Something in that apartment wanted me, and it wasn't going to stop until it broke me. The next morning, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I went downstairs to speak with one of the older tenants. He was always sitting outside, chain smoking on the cracked stone steps. When I mentioned my unit number, 6B, his eyes hardened. He dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his shoe, and shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't be in there," he said. His voice was raspy, his tone final. That place should have been boarded up years ago. I pressed him. desperate for answers. And reluctantly, he told me. Years ago, a young woman had lived in 6B. Heartbroken. After her boyfriend left, she fell into despair. No one knows exactly how long she was alone, but one night, she took her own life in that apartment. Her body wasn't found for days. By the time they discovered her, the stench of decay had already spread through the building. People said she never left. Every tenant who tried to stay in 6B reported the same things. The smell, the footsteps, the scratching. Some claimed to see her. None of them lasted more than a few weeks. Until me. I felt my blood turn cold. Everything I'd been experiencing suddenly made sense, yet made it so much worse. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't stress. It was her. And she was still there. I knew I had to leave. I called my landlord that day, said there was an emergency, and told him I'd be moving out before the end of the month. He didn't sound surprised. He didn't even ask why. But leaving wasn't as simple as packing a few bags, because the apartment didn't want to let me go. The last week was unbearable. The lights flickered constantly, sometimes going out altogether. Doors slammed in the night, even when I locked them. And always, that suffocating stench. It followed me like a shadow, clinging to everything I touched. When I went to work, my coworkers wrinkled their noses. They didn't say anything, but I could tell. They smelled it too. By the final night, I was running on no sleep, no sanity. I had packed my essentials, stacked my boxes near the door, ready to escape as soon as morning came. I told myself, one more night. Just survive one more night. But of course, she wasn't finished with me yet. At around 2 a.m., every light in the apartment went out at once. Darkness swallowed me whole. Then came the cold, so sharp it cut straight through my bones. And beneath it, the sound. A woman sobbing. Soft at first, but multiplying, echoing from every corner of the room. Then the sobs grew louder, harsher, until they were screams. Anguished, guttural screams that rattled the walls. I clutched my phone, fumbling for the flashlight. But before I could turn it on, I saw her, standing at the end of the hallway. Her body twisted at unnatural angles, head cocked too far to the side, limbs jerking as if every step dislocated her joints. With each movement, her bones cracked like snapping twigs. Crek, crek. The sound carried through the darkness as she shuffled closer. I ran to the front door, yanking at the knob. It wouldn't budge. I twisted, slammed my shoulder into it, screamed until my throat burned. But the door held tight, as though the building itself was keeping me prisoner. When I turned back, she was halfway down the hall. Her face was clearer than ever. Skin gray, eyes nothing but pits of shadow, and from her mouth dripped thick black liquid. Her arms stretched toward me, fingers long and clawed, as if eager to wrap around my throat. I thought I was going to die there, in that apartment, just like her. She was nearly upon me when something changed. The doorknob in my hand twisted violently, on its own, and with a deafening crack, the door flew open. I didn't stop to question it. I bolted into the hallway, bare feet slapping against the cold tile. I didn't grab my bags, my boxes, my clothes. I left it all behind. Behind me, the apartment door slammed shut with a finality that shook the entire floor. I didn't look back. Not once. I ran down the stairwell, past every landing, until I burst out into the humid Dallas night. The air outside hit me like salvation. It smelled of asphalt and gasoline and the faint tang of rain. Mundane, earthly smells that grounded me in reality. I staggered to the curb, chest heaving, and sat there until dawn. I must have looked insane to anyone who passed by, but no one stopped, and maybe that was for the best. I never set foot in apartment 6B again. The landlord didn't call. He didn't ask about the unpaid rent or the belongings I'd abandoned. It was as if he'd expected this all along. For weeks, I tried to rebuild my life in a new place. A different apartment across town, brighter, cleaner, with no history I knew of. But the damage was already done. At night, when the city grew quiet, I would hear it again. That faint knocking against the walls. Soft at first, then more insistent, as if testing me. Sometimes, I would wake up certain I felt someone sitting on the edge of my bed. The mattress sinking, the air chilling, my breath catching in my throat. And when I dared to open my eyes, there was nothing. But I can't shake the thought that she followed me. That whatever tied her to apartment 6B wasn't bound by walls or doors. That once she touched me, once she pressed her weight down on my chest, a part of her came with me. I left my belongings behind that night. But maybe she never let me leave. Josh ends his story there. And if you're wondering, no. He never went back for his things. Clothes, furniture, keepsakes from his old life. They're still rotting inside 6B, just as he left them. Gathering dust alongside something far darker. So tell me, if you found yourself in Josh's place, what would you have done? Would you have lasted longer than a month? Or would you have run the very first night the footsteps stopped outside your door? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had an experience of your own, an apartment, a house, a hotel that left its mark on you, share it with us. Your story might be the next one told here. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell, so you don't miss the next chilling story from the Bone Library. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, sometimes the place you call home is the one that wants you the least.